Well, hey, hello, and good evening, and welcome to Real Talk with the Cummings. I'm Mark Angelo.
And I'm Lena Ariel.
And we're live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, more specifically Victoria Park, which is in the Wilk Manor. It's kind of like the San Francisco of Florida. Very beautiful, sunny ocean.
Not many hills, though.
No hills and snow and cold weather, which I know is a big thing now with a lot of places.
Yeah, it's been getting cold, even all the way down to Orlando. It got cold.
Yeah, it did. And I just spoke to our guest. We'll be bringing on a little bit. It's going to snow in Colorado tomorrow. So I'm glad we're here and not there.
We just got over, well, I'm still on it.
Yeah.
But we were on a fast, recently.
Yes. You're still on yours. And yeah. I dropped out on day 5, not completely. I'm drinking juices and watermelon. That's about it, because, I kind of want to still show support. I fasted so many times before that I can't afford to wither away anymore. I got to stay at my weight, because when I go to that extreme, I look like a skeleton, and it's no good. But anyway, tonight we have S.J. Miller, an associate professor of literacy. It's not rolling? Okay, there we go. Of literacy at the University of Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, exactly, and affiliate faculty for CU's Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence, CSPV, LGBTQ Studies, Culture, Language, and Social Practice, CLASP, and Women and Gender Studies.
SJ's research is framed around social justice. SJ's works have appeared in a number of journals, including English Education, English Journal, Allen Review, Teacher Education, and also several others.
Queer youth are suffering. They're suffering when they come to school. We see larger suicidal ideation. We see higher truancy rates, higher rates of bullying, higher dropout rates. We see struggles in employment, and we see students who don't want to be part of the system because school does not speak to them.
And now, welcome to the show, Dr. S.J. Miller.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you for having me. That was a beautiful introduction of you two.
It's a pleasure. We've known each other for a little while there, and I know you're definitely a very academic and very interesting individual, and I thought, what better person to have on our show? We love to showcase positive stories, and yours is definitely one of those positive stories. So welcome, and thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
So you're going to get some snow tomorrow.
We are. I don't understand Colorado weather. We literally go from 70 to 20 to 60. It's completely off, and makes no sense.
That's crazy.
You must love it, though. I mean, do you ski, snowboard?
Yeah, I mean, I do triathlons, and so I'm outside a lot, and I do love to ski. So it's nice in that way, but it's expensive. It's expensive to be an athlete.
Oh yeah, I bet. I've been to Boulder before. It's such a beautiful city. Just right on the edge there of the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ski. I think I went to the Poconos Mountain or Poconos, whatever that is.
Poconos,
and I went like that little tubing.
Those are not mountains, by the way.
Well, I went on that little tubing thing, and it was like, that was tubing. Yeah, that was the last for me. As an occupational therapist, I've had to really heal a lot of people that have had skiing accidents, and it's not for me.
Well, I couldn't figure out snowboarding, but skiing I got down pretty well because I grew up in the local kind of Southern California area, and our local mountains had snow every so often, and it was really fun. But Colorado is another world entirely. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So let's get going with some of the questions. Also, if the callers want to call in, they're invited to, and the number is 575-519-5930. And if you enter the chat room, the number's right there in case you forget. And you could also chat away and join us. Ask any question, comments for either SJ or herself. Say whatever you want. This is your platform. And here we go. Well, SJ, tell us about your talk. It's kind of like a talk or seminar. It's called Creating Safe and Inclusive Spaces for Trans and Gender Nonconforming Athletes.
Sure. So I myself was a trans athlete. Although I wasn't identified that way, internally I was identified that way. And I went to UC Berkeley on a full ride. I was actually the first female All-American soccer player out of New Mexico, and had a lot of college recruiters coming to me, and I chose Cal. And that was really the time when, when you break away from home and you're first starting college, you really have that time to figure out who you are. And I was coming to terms with my gender identity, but I didn't have language for that in the 80s. Most of us kind of glommed on to what was there. So gender identity really wasn't, like being trans at least, wasn't necessarily reflected back to me in any way. So I was kind of really gender confused. And when I was, oops, did that ring?
Yeah.
Bell?
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, that's my email. It's a little annoying. I'll get it off in a minute. So anyway, so what I was noticing were all these microaggressions happening to me on my team, having less playing time, being housed with other LGBT athletes, people averting their eyes, not really knowing who I was or what I was, right? And so that really started to shut me down as an athlete, and my flow started to fade away. Being an athlete had always meant everything to me, and I no longer was succeeding as an athlete. And so what's happened to me much later in life is I wanted to reach back into that younger me and start to think about what does it mean to create safe and inclusive spaces for athletes where they had room and opportunity to be in flow, to experience that love of self in an environment that they already loved. So I've been doing work with students and coaches to talk about what do trans microaggressions look like on the playing field, and how do we move towards acceptance with everybody who's playing, whether that means equitable playing time, not positioning students as trans, but really understanding what it means to create an inclusive team.
So how open have they been to these seminars? And it's an amazing thing that you're doing, because I'm sure there are a lot of amazing trans athletes who are going through the things that you went through when it wasn't the language. And now that, even though there's better things in the language.
Uh-oh. We cut out. Hello?
This is usually what happens sometimes when the internet just kind of poops out a little bit. Let me see.
We have like super fast internet.
Yeah, we do. Ours is super fast. So, but I'll give SJ a chance to call right back. So if you guys need to go to the bathroom or do something, time to do it. Yeah,
Are we back on?
Yeah, you're back on. I'm just seeing your picture though.
Okay, hold on. I have no idea what just happened.
And sometimes the internet will kick you out like that. We have super duper fast internet because we used to have that problem a lot. There you are. You're back.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So I think you were asking how open are people?
Yeah, how open and how receptive have they been towards your seminar talks?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question, because what usually happens at the end, people come up to me and they're like, I didn't even know I was doing that. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. And oftentimes what happens is the players and the other students that are hearing this for the first time, all of a sudden realize that they have agency and they can actually work within their own team, those systems, to push back and to create more inclusive environments. And that's kind of what a microaggression is. People don't even realize they're doing it. And so to bring that to their attention starts to develop some type of internal safety where they become more willing to take risks again.
And is this something that you do on an ongoing basis, that our viewers or individuals that are they have a trans kid who wants to be in sports but are being, like you said, the school or the academy or whatever is not being as supportive and accepting? Because this is something that's very crucial. I mean, because there are a lot of, even in schools. I mean, I remember when Jazz Jennings was trying to get into the soccer team as a girl, they wouldn't let her, and it's something that really needs to be looked at.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of policy work that has to happen in youth sports, and I'm not up to date on what's happening in different communities. But I do know that when somebody calls me and says, hey, would you come in? I come in. I haven't done it that much, but the work's out there, and I'd like to see more people doing this work across the country. It has to happen. I mean, it's a huge outlet for most people in general, not just trans people.
I think that the atmosphere is really, really good for it right now.
It's pretty right.
And I think that it's something that I'm sure if you contacted certain individuals out there that were responsible for programs, and I'm sure people would be very open to it.
So,
how is trans inclusiveness on college campuses with regards to trans athletes?
I'm not honestly up to date on that. What I do know is that if you want to play a sport, let's say you're an F to M, you have to be a non-hormonal taking F to M in order to participate in an NCAA sports. If you're on hormones, they won't let you participate. I don't know about M to Fs, but I would presume that there's some type of a hormonal issue as well. The issue, though, becomes a much larger systemic issue where people are policed by the viewers, the spectators, and that starts to impact the individual. And I don't think you see that many trans athletes in sports. I've seen a couple swimmers come out, and I think the swimmer's at Harvard, actually, and that person does take hormones because I know that it predated his transition to the university. So in other words, you can't be switching onto hormones to play. You have to have been on the hormones prior to coming onto the sport.
Well, that makes sense. That really does make a lot of sense.
What are your thoughts on gender identity, for instance?
My thoughts on gender identity.
Pretty wide. That's a pretty big question.
That's broad, right? That's right.
Lots of different directions with it, but
yeah. Well, I know one thing for sure, that when I teach, I'm very mindful of my own language, and I have created a statement in my syllabus which is pretty broad, and I tell my students right away that this is a space that honors diversity across the spectrum of subjectivities, and I'll say gender identity and agender identity, right? Because I think that there are people that don't take on a gender at all, and they refuse to be gendered. In fact, I have a friend that identifies as a xylophone, and I think good for you, good for xylophone, and because I do think that gender is a construct to begin with. And so when you talk about gender identity, for me, for instance, I don't identify with a gender at all. I am agender. And I specifically see agender, not agendered, because that is a verb, right? That's something that has happened to me rather than a noun, something that I am. That's very essential to me. And so I push back a lot. I don't consider myself an F to M. I consider myself a female toward male, right? That I'm on a continuum of a spectrum of identities. And I don't want to be located anywhere in that space. but I recognize that I am part of the process of being gendered by people. So I take on a language that I think is more authentic to who I am.
And that's, that's excellent, because I think everybody should be entitled to identify as they see fit instead of falling to the box of man, woman, boy, girl. Humanity is so used to that. Where do you fit in this box? What do you mean? You have to fit somewhere. I know I've struggled a lot with that in the past. At one point, I'm completely 100% male. I never deny my being trans, because I can't deny that I was born female. But certain things in my life and certain events have finally concreted that this vehicle right here that I created is who I am. I tried the lipstick and the dresses again, and it was fun for a while, because it's always fun to play dress up. But this is cool. This is what feels good.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. And in fact, I love playing with the word trans. I know people push back and they're like, it's transgender, it's trans without an asterisk, it's lowercase trans with an asterisk, etc. But I see trans as both a noun and a verb. So I like the idea of the verb, because it means I can move back and forth constantly, right? I'm transing this, I'm transing that, I'm returning to something, I'm abdicating something, I'm embracing something one day. And it allows me that fluidity to constantly be in development. In fact, in my research, I've just created what's called a trans theory and a trans pedagogy, which nobody's done in education before, which is this notion that it's okay to be in the gray. And it's also okay to not be in the gray. And how do these kind of paradoxical ideas coexist in the classroom space? So the challenge then becomes, how do we help teachers really embrace that and offer that to students? We don't have to live in a this or that world.
So let me ask you, was this always the case when you first transitioned? Because, I know that during our interaction, and I apologize because I was not aware that you preferred no pronouns and you didn't go by he, and I referred to you as he in our interaction. It was like, oh, bad. I wasn't, it was like, I wasn't sure, because I don't remember that we first interacted way back when that you didn't like to use pronouns. So can you elaborate a little bit on this, and why you prefer not to use any pronouns, and when did it start?
Sure. Well, I think that goes along for me with the whole idea of being agender, because if I'm agender, I can't have pronouns. And in fact, it's funny, because I think when I was first coming to terms with my language around being trans, I didn't know it was okay to not have a gender, right? Or that I couldn't use pronouns. And I think as I've come to terms more with the politicization of being trans, it's like, that's the whole point. We get to be who we are. We get to construct our identity. And I don't have to have my identity reified in such a way that I have to be located in this or that space. And I think that the pushing back has become one of the most exciting and sexy places to be, right?
Right.
We're moving away from the colonization and the history of gender that has always told us we had to be one way or the other. And that's exciting. It's liberating. It's completely liberating, right?
How about the concept that, trans could also mean fluidly transparent, in a way where gender it gets blurred in the traditional sense. And it's a new form of expressing one's own humanity.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I would like to see us moving towards, and I write about this in my new book called A Post-Trans Space, right? So where this whole idea of being trans, it kind of evaporates, but it still exists, so that we don't have to point out that someone's trans. But at the same time, we still want to be identified. We just want it to be normalized. And our recognition matters in a way that it never has mattered before, right? I'd like to just say, hey, I'm trans, what's for dinner? And just have, who cares? Like, right, And I think that, I hope in our lifetime, maybe not, I don't think it's going to happen in the next 20 years, but I do think there's going to be systemic shifts by the time we're really into our 80s and 90s. I truly believe that.
Do you see shifts happening like among college students where you teach and stuff? I mean, compared to what it was like maybe 10, 15 years ago, or?
Yeah. How old are you two? Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm 51.
I'm 46.
Okay, 51. You're 51?
I am, yeah.
Mark, you're so beautiful for 51.
Thank you. I take care of myself, you know, fasting, eating the right kind of foods. I've been working out for quite a while now, and it's just, I think it's what you put in, your skin and everything, it really does help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and I are the same age. I'm 46 as well. Yeah. So here's my experience. I started teaching middle school when I was 24. And at that time, it was like this, that we had gay kids in the school. It wasn't that they weren't there, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody was teaching literature that really like spoke to those kids' realities and identities. And there was a lot of bullying. Not that bullying is not there today, but I do think that there has been a shift. Now, by the time I stopped teaching, I taught in middle and high school for 8 years. There were more and more gay straight alliances popping up all over the country. And so in that time, I was seeing more and more kids come out of the closet, but nothing around being trans. So by the time I left the classroom in 2005 and went into academia, I would say in that time between like 2005 and 2010, I started to really see a radical shift, because not only were those GSAs popping up everywhere, but you started to see a youth shift come through saying, I don't identify as gay or lesbian or bi even. There's something going on in my gender. And I really think we started to see a rise within the younger population and parents starting to get more involved. They say, my kid's not male or female, my kid is trans. And what I'm seeing right now, especially in my university at CU, trans is the new frontier. You know, we don't just have, you probably have seen this, they're being called LGBT centers. Now they're being called gender and sexuality centers across the United States, instead of what we saw when we were probably in college. But yes, I see a huge shift right now. And I see anti-bullying policies coming out faster than we can keep up with. And I think school districts are also getting much more involved than they've ever been. And there's more trans-inclusive policies at the district level.
Definitely, it's blown up.
I think that the kids, actually, the younger generation, are really starting to embrace, in general, this genderless type of existence that they actually do have, you know. And so what I see a lot with a lot of young kids is whenever you look on YouTube or Facebook or Tumblr or whatever, you see these, you know, this change where they're not really identifying with being male or female.
Yeah. In fact, I gave a talk. We had a trans symposium at CU last week, and Keek and his wife came, and we had CC McDonald, and we had, who else was there? I can't remember the other person that was there. But when you looked across the audience, I mean, how many spaces have 4-year-olds and 80-year-olds, you know, talking about trans issues and gender identity issues in the same room? And for those 80-year-olds, so many folks of that generation have drawn courage from the younger generation to really move them along in this process. And then to be born in a world right now where you're already recognized and you don't have to fight those self-esteem issues all the way through like many of us had to do in order to feel okay about ourselves. And that to me is so exciting, because those kids are going to change. They're going to rock the world. You can just rock it.
I had a little reservation, we had a little reservation in the beginning from that because I was concerned with the medication since I'm so anti-prescription drugs and things of the nature. And I know people say I'm a hypocrite because I take testosterone, but you know, I'm an adult, I can make that decision. My brain's been developed. And I'm sure you're well versed in a lot of things. The brain really doesn't develop till after 21. That's the reason we can't vote and we can't drink till that age. So I'm not saying, you know, kids should not be allowed to express and be. I'm just a little concerned that the medical industry is kind of taking liberties and taking advantage. And I'm all for, my God, I wish I would have, if my parents would have allowed me to do things. And, you know, and a transition as young as 21. And I know that there's secondary characteristics and I know there's a lot. So I feel a little torn. I'm a little more open to it now since my detransitioning and then coming back. I think a lot differently than I did back then, but it still kind of worries me. And you mentioned something about bullying, and Linda has a question for you regarding that.
Well, neurological changes are responsible for many of our behaviors and imbalances. Can you go into the neuroscience of bullying?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it as much as I understand it. Something happens in the individual, whether it is from home, whether it's the way that they've interpreted the idea of what is normative, which then gets validated by the DSM. So in other words, and I'm sure that most of our viewers know what the DSM is, right? Because we've had to be diagnosed in order to access, you know, the medical industry for hormones or surgeries. And so for whatever reason, when an idea gets normalized and validated within the DSM, bullies, my argument is that they're attuned to that validation because it gives them a rationale to say, hey, you're wrong, you're deviant, you've been diagnosed. And that has somehow channeled or found its way back into that student's brain, into their brain chemistry. And it starts to take on a life of its own. Now, bullies can't exist by themselves. They're in hierarchies, right? And so in order to be that bully, typically you have to have a follower and someone that supports your belief systems. Bullies don't usually operate by themselves. And so what happens is you have these kind of gang mentalities, and sometimes there's a break in that hierarchy, and usually that person that breaks ends up also getting bullied. So the bully bullies and is fed by that activity or that action, excuse me, and then somehow is validated by the system. Whether that's you're right or you're wrong, there's still some type of a language. And sometimes there's restorative justice, and the bully really can undo that behavior. But it's what my argument is that it's a systems approach that gets validated within the medical model.
Yeah, it's pretty much, I believe, it's like it feeds itself, you know, and it's rewarded in a certain way. And I believe, I mean, I was bullied and made fun of, and I'm sure all of us that were, whether you're gay, trans, you know, just an introvert, all sorts of different things. And I believe that it's almost like, you know, when the dog knows you fear them, and we emit this chemical, and the dog then will want to attack, versus if you just kind of like don't show that dog that you're afraid and don't feed into that whole scenario, I think that there will be less bullying. And I'm not trying to blame.
That's right.
This is not victim blaming. It's just that for every action, there's a reaction. It's the law,
right?
You know, and I think that by empowering the individual that is being bullied, that doesn't mean they have to go beat up on people or teach them martial arts or anything like that. Empower them not to allow the other person to have so much power over them.
SJ, were you bullied as, you know, you were an athlete, and, you know, were you popular at school back in high school and growing up in the 80s?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I wasn't bullied in school. I was so serious about my sports and my schooling. I had a really, excuse my language, really fucked up family. And so soccer and school was my escape from that situation. And I took it very, very seriously. I had a boyfriend almost all through high school. I was in with the jocks and the nerds. But my students, what I found later in life was they were the ones being bullied. And I wanted to be part of that disruption, which brings me back to your question, because the thing about bullying too is that when teachers don't talk about different identities, it actually condones violence, right? It's like silence equals death. And so teachers become mediators and disruptors of bullying by just bringing it to students' attentions within textbooks and so forth. And so I've tried to be a disruptor within my classroom, and by using text and language and so forth, and to help kids really see that they're enacting microaggressions and they're marginalizing and hurting the kids in their environments. So yeah, I was bullied in my family, but just not at school.
Well, that's where it starts usually.
Yeah.
The kid that bullies somebody else is usually being bullied by their parents. I mean, it's one of those
right
kind of thing.
Right.
Besides being an athlete and besides all the academia and stuff, what is your passion? What are the passions that you have?
My passions. I love movies. I'm such a junkie. I seriously see 2 or 3 movies a week at least, and I love art house cinema. I can't get enough of it. I've discovered Amazon Prime movies, and I mean, honestly, I wish I could be a full-time film critic. Just watch movies. I love series as well, like on Netflix. Right now, I'm almost at the end of House of Cards, and I don't want it to end. I'm like savoring every piece of it. So film, and I love reading, especially historical nonfiction. I read a lot of urban literature as well, and I'm deeply passionate about young adult literature. I think that was something that was completely absent from my experience as a child. I read all the classics. I took all honors and AP classes, and back in that day, nobody was teaching young adult literature and graphic novels and multimodal text. And right now, it's like I can't get enough of that, because I think it feeds that teenager in me that didn't get to just read for pleasure. I mean, reading for pleasure was reading Hawthorne, right? or reading Dostoevsky, or all the classics, and I wasn't turned on as a reader. I've become a reader as an adult.
So do you like have a Kindle account and read digitally, or do you actually go to the library and get books?
No, I get books. My office, we're at my home right now. I have probably 1,000 books in my office at work. I can't even keep them here. So yeah, and I love Entertainment Weekly. That's my other type of crack. I like keeping up with what's happening in Hollywood for whatever reason. So
your DVD collection, or do you have a big collection of DVDs as well?
no, because of the access we have on the internet, So
Yeah, I think that's shortly going to go out of business. DVDs
yeah, well, yeah, but
that's like 8 tracks.
But 80s and 90s kids, I'm sure, like the parents before, they had all the records and stuff.
Yeah.
Or 8 tracks. We had the DVDs and the CDs.
We had these story
It's true. It's true.
It's like, oh, this is a song. You had to like click, and oh, it's not there yet.
I know, it's crazy.
Do you still have all your tapes and records?
Oh God, no, I've gotten rid of, I've done a lot of spiritual journeys, and I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. I mean, I've like tore down, rebuilt. It's like, I want to get rid of this. So I have absolutely none of it.
And I don't have anything either, because when I fell off the mountain after visiting him, a lot of my stuff fell on the mountain with me. So basically everything else that I had up in Minnesota, I have not seen anymore. It's gone. So,
oh, wow.
Those are just memories, and we make memories.
Yeah.
And
It's true. Yeah. The other thing I love to do, I think, which brings me probably the deepest level of comfort, is I write. And I write a lot. I'm finishing my 6th book right now. And one thing that I'm coming back to that academia has actually pushed out of my life is poetry. I used to be a slam poet, and I'm just starting to find that piece of myself again. I'm not teaching this semester, so I've had more freedom to get back into my right brain. But I can't. I'd actually love to be a full-time writer if I could.
Excellent.
Now, we read about a bunch of your accomplishments and stuff, and we didn't have enough time in the bio introducing you to.
So I kind of like edit it up a little bit.
But
So.
you could tell us about all your many wonderful accomplishments and what you've not accomplished yet that you would like to do.
I would like to be fluent in Spanish, honestly. My Spanish is awful. It's definitely a regret, and I hope to immerse myself someday in doing that.
Si quiere practicar ahora, estamos aquí.
Sí, podemos practicar contigo como quieras, porque even though we have the last name Cummings, you know, my
heritage is Cuban and mine's Puerto Rican. So.
Yeah, so you ever need to practice, you know.
Yeah, just give us a call.
Well, you all have it's such an important skill. I feel like to be an American means you need to be able to speak Spanish and English, and be able to code shift all the time. So I admire that in both of you. What else would I want to do that I haven't done? I guess it's cliche, but sure, I'd like to travel more. I have a study going in South Africa. I want to get back to Johannesburg. I'm going to go to Cape Town. I have a research partner there named Dennis Francis, and he's actually starting the first Gender and Sexualities Institute on the entire continent, which is really exciting. So I went over and worked with him last year with a bunch of his doctoral students, and they are all becoming practitioners and health workers in South Africa right now. So that's part of it. I'd like to travel, and what else would I want to do? Kill my fear of heights. Be able to parasail.
Just do it. That's the only way you're going to be able to get rid of that fear.
I can't even barely like live on a second floor of an apartment. I get scared.
That's interesting because people and their fears, there's usually something. I mean, I believe in reincarnation, past life, and all that crazy stuff, but there's usually something, whether when you were young, that led you to that fear. And I believe the only way to really master that is to take yourself back, meditate, and find out, you know, what it is that actually has caused you to have this fear. And little by little, baby steps, really conquer it, because there's nothing more wonderful than to actually conquer your fears. Really.
Maybe you can come with me. So you know, I've always been a swimmer, and I was a diver, like on low boards. When I was an exchange student in Germany when I was 16, and we went to a Schwimmbad, and they had one of those high-rise diving boards, and so I went up. It was the first time this has ever happened to me, and I walked to the edge of the diving board, and I froze. I couldn't even move. I started crying, and they had to clear the ladder and actually bring the lifeguards up to walk me down, and I've never been able to get over that fear.
Yeah, and
out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, that was the first time that ever happened.
Out of nowhere. Yeah, I went on high dives before. Never got scared.
Did you ever get hurt, or was there some sort of maybe dream that you had, or recollection, or something? That's very interesting stuff. Like Many Lives, Many Masters, a very interesting book that they hypnotize people. This one particular doctor took the person back to her prior life because she had fear of drowning, and it turned out that she had drowned in a previous life. So I'm wondering if, you know, you went through, I mean, certain parts, like, you know how you dream and you don't remember your dream, so something triggers it, and you're like, all of a sudden you're remembering that dream that you had the night before. So it sounds like something. I mean, it'd be interesting to look into. I'm weird that way.
So if you're like standing like on a really cool ski slope over there in Colorado, and you're about to go down, you're scared?
You know, it's the same thing. I actually have become much more cautious in downhill motion, and yeah, I'm more tentative. So I cycle all the time too, and I'm very mindful of my speed. There's something that holds me back from just.
Was this before T or after T?
Yeah, no, way after. Like, no, I'm sorry. Before I was 16 when this started.
Wow. Interesting.
So, and then one time, the other thing too that happened maybe 3 or 4 years after that is I was cycling and there was a volleyball net. And you know how volleyball nets have those thin cords that stretch out?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it. I was cycling full speed and there was a volleyball court or volleyball net and the rope cut my neck.
Oh.
Pulled me off, and like I was really lucky it didn't go deep. I mean, it bled and I had to go to the hospital, and that kind of slowed me down too, because that was a serious cut. I still have scars from the catch on my neck.
And sometimes certain changes in your neurological system can create things of that nature, the fear. And I've always been the kind of person, face your fears. And it's, not everyone can do it. It's empowering, but it'd be interesting if you like maybe some hypnosis or just like let your inner child out when writing and just let that inner child talk to you. And as you're feeling that inner child coming out, the words that it wants to say, it's almost like going really deep within your consciousness.
Yeah.
You never know.
I'll think about it. That's a really good point.
So you mentioned things that you'd like to accomplish. What are certain things that you would like the viewers to know that you have accomplished?
Say that again. I couldn't hear that part.
What are some of the things that you would like the viewers to know of your accomplishments?
I have 2 cats and they're well adjusted.
Great.
That's always good because cats are really difficult to train. They were like litter mates, and I taught them how to fetch. They would come on demand or command, and people think cats are dumb, but they're not. They're very bright. You know how to teach them, and you have to go on their time, not your time. Dogs want to please, cats don't.
So are you going anywhere in the near future other than South Africa?
Yeah, and I was just telling Mark this before we got on. I was just asked by UNESCO, which is the United Nations branch of education that moves towards sustainability, peace, and security around the entire world, within different sections around different topics, excuse me. And I was invited to be part of a series where we're looking at how do you put peace into textbooks in India. And so we webinared this morning. It was like 16 scholars from around the world. And I was asked to be the United States representative on this commission. And they're going to either be bringing us to India or the UK in June. But the reason I said, well, are you sure you have the right email? Are you sure you're reaching out to the right person? And they said yes. And the reason that they gave me the explanation is I started the first commission for social justice and education in the United States. And as a result of that work, we've been together now for, it'd be 12 years. It's a group of scholars in my field. I'm in English education. And we created a space where we were housing research, people doing research on social justice and what it means in the school system. And what's happened is the research has grown to a point where there's now what's called a standard. And I don't know how you all know how standards work in education, but in order for a teacher to now be certified in English, to be a middle school or high school English teacher, they have to show that they know what it means to teach for social justice. It is the first standard in the United States in any discipline. So the teaching history doesn't have it. Teaching social mathematics and science those fields don't have it yet. But what's going to happen is they're going to be studying what we did in English, so that each field then takes upon that standard, so that teachers in those disciplines actually know what it looks like to teach for social justice. And it's exciting because, if you think about the history of education in the United States, we didn't have schools of education until the late 1890s. And so our profession is actually much newer than the sciences and the maths and the physics, etc. And so change has been very, very slow to happen in teacher education.
That's an amazing accomplishment that you would be.
Well, your bio is a mile long, and people could always visit the website. You have your own page there with all the great accomplishments that you have done. Now, besides all those great accomplishments, is there room for love in SJ's life? And if so, are you currently involved? If not, who would be that ideal mate for you?
No, I'm single. I've been single for a very long time. I date here and there, but I think the ideal partner would be someone that has their own career and their own life and is very independent, and someone I would never have to see or hang out with or spend time with. No, I'm kidding.
That just killed your anybody. You're like, okay.
I'm gonna stay single. Yeah, I'm a sapiosexual. And for folks that don't know what that means, I'm drawn to people's minds.
Well,
really,
it would make perfect sense being an academic individual, and then just I could see it that you're just like so engulfed in wanting to know, and it's like it's great because I love that too. I mean, a lot of my relationships that have ended in the past is because I'm having a conversation, and I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I love to engage in conversation, and I can talk about anything a little bit here and there, even though I don't know the topic completely. But most people, it's like after a while, you're like, okay, I'm bored. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. You know, in terms of like my sexual orientation, I definitely identify as pan, which for me goes with being sapio, because I'm just open to people in general.
So who would be that perfect mate then?
Who? I don't know. I haven't met that person.
But if you had a genie and rubbed that genie's bottle and the genie is telling you, okay, let's say, if you could design your perfect mate.
If I could design,
Yes.
Humor is huge for me. Somebody that appreciates the arts, film, music, dance. Someone who's a reader, a thinker, and someone who's pretty right-brained. I like to live in a creative space, and I think creativity also fosters the need to have some isolation, because to get to the creativity, you need to kind of have that time to yourself. So someone that can appreciate being right-brained, or is even very right-brained.
So have you tried any of these dating sites? Not I'm trying to hook you up or anything like that, but have you, because usually that's like, if you have specifics, I've never used a dating site, but if you have specifics, you and I met on Facebook through a friend that introduced us. It was like a blind date type of thing. Because what is it? All these now Spaces, Cupid, and all these other things where you write specifically what you know, and I know people lie and stuff like that, but I'm sure there are other people out there exactly how you explain that you would love to have in your life.
Yes, I'm currently on a dating site and nobody asks me out. You know, you can hit like, and then you got to pay to see who liked you back, so you don't even know. I'm not gonna pay, but I mean, I guess I could. But no, I don't get asked out.
One of the things I'm a big believer is the mind is powerful. You visualize what you want. I mean, you get to the point we get stuck in ruts and stuff like that, and we continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, and we're wondering why we're single, why we're alone, why we're sick, why we're fat. And I think we just like tell ourselves, stop and start visualizing every night when you meditate, when you're just laying down in bed before you fall asleep, and visualize that loving person that you want in your life. So I think it's important not to be alone. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, humans are meant to have a mate. I believe, in my opinion, anyway. And, you know, you're a great individual. I would hate to see you not find that perfect someone in your life. So just a little, like the same thing with a fear, you know, just kind of like go within you and visualize every day that person. Visualize him or her in your arms, how you want them to be, how you, I don't know, it's a great tool. And I know it sounds like mumbo jumbo, but it's worked exactly for me. So.
Well, it's not just that, it's just that the concept of visualization, I think, is a lost art in our own humanity. It gets pushed down so much so by all the things that we see around us that we're like, there's no way I'm going to get over that mountain. But I mean,
right there, you're negating it.
And then I've heard, like athletes, you would probably understand this. I remember like, you hear about like a high jumper or something, or a pole vaulter. They imagine that they've already been over that, obstacle, and they perform accordingly because they've done it a bunch of times in their minds. So I just think that there's something really powerful with visualization.
Oh, there definitely is.
Yeah.
So visualization, find your mate.
Think about.
Yeah, visualization to find your mate and get rid of that fear.
We'll try.
You know what? If you know any people, I'm open to long distance. So seriously.
Well, what would you like to see happen in the future regarding trans acceptance and in education?
I'd like to see schools and classrooms that are completely devoid, free of violence of any type, free of bullying, where people just are free to be themselves from the beginning, where any type of noise in their heads fades off into the distance, and they are free to experience what's coming toward them, and they get to learn, and not be in a cognitive overload, which I see a lot of kids experience, on a day-to-day basis. And my hope is that the policies that are within what they're called codes of conduct, those codes of conducts are open and inclusive of all the identities in the school. And that's going to take outreach to parents, to community members, to school boards, to state legislatures, etc. But constituents have to come together to make this happen. And my hope is that the schooling system does become a space that fosters love and acceptance and recognition for any student that walks through the doors, not just trans kids, but any kid, regardless of who they are, but because of who they are.
The political system needs to get itself together, and adults need to get themselves together to be able to foster that and carry it over into the school system.
That's right.
With regards to the trans community, do you see like the pushback being more of a generational thing than anything else? Because visualize like 20 years from now, the kids that have grown up in this, trans inclusive environment, they're going to grow up in a world that's much different than your mom and dad or my mom and dad grew up in, or even us. So I'm just wondering, do you think that the pushback is really generational and that it's just going to die off eventually?
So do you mean that when you say the pushback, do you mean that the difficulty that's coming towards us right now is going to fade away? I do. I think there are more trans kids coming out of the closet left and right, and I think that there's power in numbers. And by the time they become adults and older adults, I mean, they're going to be our CEOs, our politicians, our laborers, our everything, and they're going to be part of the general population, and hopefully even a president one day, right? So I do think that over time, and as trans becomes more spatialized, not just in the United States, right, but more broadly speaking, we're going to have stronger coalitions and stronger types of empowerment, because we're going to learn from other communities, right? We're going to learn from people abroad, and by that point, who knows what types of policies are going to be enacted. So yes, I do think things will fade away eventually.
Every minority group, eventually, they melt away.
They melt away, right. And we'll be and the issue will be a new identity that none of us could have ever predicted. Like, we'll be dealing with cyborgs, right? The evolution of trans cyborgs, or being post-human.
Yeah, what they call it now, transhumanism, that they're creating. There's a lot of scary things that are actually going on that they're not telling us about, but it's like robots,
combining technology
and like the better human, the superhuman, like
Robocop forever or something.
That's right. And that's the thing, is it always becomes a larger group that becomes the bullied group, and then that fades away and there's a new iteration. And so it's just the way the world works.
That's how the cookie crumbles. And we talk about kids and young LGBT youth. What advice and words of encouragement do you have for them?
Surround yourself with people who accept you for who you are, who mirror back how you feel about yourself. People that can always remind you that you're loved, that you're cared for, and that you matter. And never settle for anything less. And hopefully one day, the mirror that you look into will always become your friend. I think for trans people, the mirror has been our enemy in many ways, because we don't see ourselves reflected back in the ways we want to be seen. And my hope for you is that the mirror becomes you, and you become the mirror.
Excellent. That's very true. I mean, like we talked about the bullies, that the victim usually feeds the bully. You know, we feed our own fears, we feed our own lack of confidence. And I think that one of the things that we as humans, like not just gays and trans and lesbians, everyone that has felt bad about themselves, whether it's because they have a weight problem or just don't like the way they speak, they stutter, they don't like the way their face looks, we need to learn to be more gentle with ourselves and stop worrying about what other people think and just be. It's one of the things I remember as a kid, because I was cross-eyed and, you know, I had a learning disability and all sorts of stuff. And after a while, I got tired of trying to make friends. And so I was like, whoever wants to be friends with me will come towards me. I'm not going to sweat it. And I learned, you know, stay in my room, rocking my rocking chair, listen to my music, play my guitar. And I learned to revolve my world around me. And yes, I wanted friends, but it hurt too much to be made fun of. It hurt too much. So I didn't empower the boys anymore. It's like, I don't care. You can't hurt me.
Well, I'm your friend.
But, you know, I mean, that's just the way I look at it. It's like we need to empower ourselves. The ones, those of us that are different, that are the unicorns. We need to empower ourselves, love ourselves, because once you really love yourself enough, then that's when friends come in. And that's when, as an adult now, I have a lot more friends. And I've learned to break those barriers. And, you know,
I remember growing up, there was a, you know, Christmas time, Rudolph and the different Santa Clauses coming to town, those little claymation type cartoons would come on ABC or whatever network. And one of them was, you know, about like the island of misfit toys. And those toys were like on an island all by themselves, and all the normal people lived on in the rest of the world. I would venture to say that the island of misfit toys is really where most people live than the normal people.
There's,
you know,
more
because there's more people that are messed up and that are dealing with
they're
issues.
lonely, they're depressed, they're, you know, they're fearful. There's so much. And I think it's, as a species, we have been so beaten, you know, by the system, whether it's religion, politics, finances. You know, it's like, I believe it's time for people to wake up, you know, and really look around and say, there's more of us than there are of that 1%, you know, whoever's running the world and all that stuff. So, you know, it doesn't mean let's go into a revolution, let's fight, none of that. It's just learn to make peace with yourself. Learn to love yourself. And learn to, you know, just one day. So anything else you wanted to add, SJ, before we our interview with you? Amazing.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I know my cat's like hanging out on my neck.
Nice.
No, but I recently ended a talk with a quote by Laverne Cox, who said that loving a trans person is a revolutionary act. And I think that being trans is a revolutionary act. And I think it takes tremendous courage to not be in the norm and to create new paths that we're forging. And we're ultimately doing it for every other trans person that's coming behind us. And we have to keep taking care of each other. I mean, I see so many communities that try to strip each other down rather than lift each other up. And I just hope that, my hope for the trans community is that we can do that more and more over time. and put aside some of our differences. Let's banter, let's argue, but let's still love each other at the end of the conversation.
And that is so important, because I do find that a lot in the trans community. There's a lot of battle that goes on between us, and there's a lot of anger, and there's just a lot of, I guess, things that we're still dealing with from our youth, from how we got treated. But we need to put all that aside, leave the past behind, be in the now, and just be gentle, not only with others but with ourselves. And I think
right.
If we did that, then I think we could unite. And I think if we united and we were proud of who we are, then I think the rest of the world would be proud of who we are as well.
The message of so many great leaders that have come before in the past is always a message of love. Love yourself, love your neighbor, and that's a universal principle that we all can embrace. LGBT, straight, whatever.
And we will make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We make mistakes. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. Because if you don't take risk, if you don't step out of the box, if you don't question things, and you never grow and learn. So, it's being gentle itself.
I mean, people ask, so I thought you had this opinion about transitioning youth and the dangers of blockers and things like that. It's like, we evolve, people. This is who we are. We're a metamorphosis happening constantly.
Absolutely.
Why can't we just have the opportunity to not be so rigid in our estimations of what we think about others or how we form our opinions? We need to be fluid and able to change.
I agree. Totally agree.
All right, it's been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for your time and for just being the great person that you are. Wish you lots of luck in your new venture. It sounds so exciting.
It does. Lots of opportunities.
Lots and lots of opportunities.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that the two of you do to bring visibility and recognition to our community. You're doing beautiful work, and I wish you all the continued success with your talk show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Have a good one. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in yet again for the show. Next Tuesday, we have another guest, and
who is that?
Actually, it's somebody who's running a trans cruise. First time ever. Stephanie Land is her name.
Oh, good memory.
Yes. That's
cool.
As fast as got my memory, I'm like, wow. It's like before I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, let me check it out. But fast, I'm telling you, it's amazing. It clears your mind. Yeah, she lives here in Miami, and she's got a travel agency, and she's working with the UK, and they're putting things together for the trans community, because we know how difficult it is, especially for MTS, to travel. And it's something that they're going to try to just get together a bunch of trans individuals or trans-friendly individuals that would all get along and have a good old time cruising. So cool. Stephanie Lamb next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time live. And in that note, we want to tell everybody we love you, but remember to always love yourselves too. Good night.